Uh, Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. Today's guests, Owen Rogers and, of course, Graham Weatherspoon. But before we get started, you know, the latest shooting today is Tony Robinson out in Madison, Wisconsin. And I'd like to run a video clip of the latest incidents in police shootings. All right, we'll wait for Graham to come. Hopefully he can analyze this. Well, I guess another shooting is just another shooting. But I want you to hear the heartfelt family reaction to this shooting. All right? So we'll be right back after this clip. All right? Thank you.
Robinson was a beautiful boy. So don't you believe the stories they tell you about what he was or wasn't. He was a gentle, loving, caring boy. He might have been big, but he wasn't scary. I love him. Whatever injustice is done today has to be addressed and taken care of, because this shit ain't gonna go away. I'm not gonna let it go away. But I don't want violence to go along with it. That's not gonna solve anything right now. But I do believe that a man who shoots a kid 5 times for no reason and he was unarmed has to pay the price.
Damn right.
And if you don't pay the price, we gotta stand up, because this stuff has gotta be done. They're killing black kids in the street for no damn reason, and I don't appreciate it. But I don't want violence out here. I want you all to stand together and say, we don't want this anymore. There's gotta be justice. There's gotta be, here, Logan.
My nephew's never coming back. He was 19 years old. He graduated 6 months early from Sun Prairie High School. He was a beautiful, beautiful young man. He stood 6'4", 200 pounds. 200. But back him into a corner and he's gonna fold every time. He wouldn't hurt a fly. What happened here tonight, I don't have any words for it. We all sit up and we say, when we watch the stories, not us, it's not gonna happen here. But this just shows you the reach of injustice. Come on. The reach that this world has come to. Here in our little bubble of Madison, Wisconsin, and yes, we live in a bubble. We certainly do. But I want all y'all to know that for minorities, we are the top 5 worst places to live. All right. But we are the number 3 happiest cities to be in. So who is it happy for? What does this come down to? What does this all boil down to? He has 2 little brothers. A 15-year-old little brother and a 13-year-old little brother, and he has a 9-year-old little sister. I am 8.5 months pregnant, and this child will be named after my nephew. I'll never see him again. And
all of you remember that Terrell was a beautiful, beautiful soul.
That's right.
And I think the cops shot him because he was afraid of him. That's what I think. And 5 times, give me a break. That boy ain't never hurt nobody. Nobody.
He was 19 years old. He had graduated from Sun Prairie High School.
6 months early.
And he was about to go to MATC to get a business degree. The mother has asked that we have peaceful protests. The family has also asked if it's somebody, whether it's from Young Gifted or Black or some nonprofit, the family doesn't have insurance, so we need to raise money to make sure that we give them a proper burial. So if it's somebody that can help us do that, it's our responsibility for us to address this.
I do want you all to stand up. I do want you all to say, this is not right. This is not right.
All right.
Coco gonna pay for it, don't worry.
He should have lived. And if he's gonna die, I want his death to mean something. Besides just another black kid getting shot.
Right.
Who did they kill? Tony Robinson!
Who did they kill?
Tony Robinson! My grandson! And he was a beautiful, beautiful soul. And everybody who knew him knew that. Except for the cop that shot him. Now I'm asking for peace. But I'm asking you to stand and say this is wrong. Across the world, I'm hoping this happens.
Time.
It's time. Otherwise, everybody's gonna get shot by somebody sooner or later. And it's all gonna be okay.
Talk about it.
And I don't want that world. Not for the grandkids I got coming up already. They're gonna hurt the rest of their life. And you guys are gonna remember it for a minute. But in that minute, no, he was a beautiful kid, whatever they say about him. Because they're gonna twist it.
Yes, they are.
And they're gonna make you think he was this bad kid. But he's not. And he wasn't. And I want you to understand that. And I want you to stand up for him and everybody else in this world who's being discriminated against.
Hunted down like animals.
Hunted down, shot in the street like a dog.
We don't get the right.
It's just not right, man. It's not right. There's got to be peace. There's got to be love. There's got to be justice. These people, the police protect and serve. Give me a break.
They protect themselves.
Protecting themselves.
Who do we trust?
Not the police.
Who do we trust?
Not the police.
So
We
please,
trust better lives
do
ahead.
it peacefully. But stand up. Stand up in large numbers everywhere. And make sure this shit don't happen no more.
As you see, it's heart-wrenching watching that, you know, a grandmother talking about her grandson. So there next to her was her great-grandson, 8.5-month pregnant. He leaves away, leaves a beautiful family behind him. Everybody says he was a pure spirit, good guy. I see people crying in the street, the young kids, black and white. In this case, he's a mixed race. So we got everybody out on this one. So the police against the people. Because he was a big guy, here we go with the big guys. You know, I know I'm tall and intimidating, but I'm a nice guy. And I'm 6'2", but you got these 6'4", 200 pounds. Scared to death, right?
6'4", 200 pounds is not that big a guy. And we have to continually look at the way that these people are perceiving black men.
Yeah, exactly the point.
I fought guys 80, 90 pounds heavier than I and bigger than myself, and I fought them by myself. Didn't have to shoot anybody. But I saw Tony's uncle on television yesterday. I think he's 24, 25 years old. And he handled a press conference like a pro.
Really?
A beautiful press conference. I was watching it, I think, on CNN. And he brought out some very striking points with regard to how media will try to portray his nephew. The fact, as the grandmother was saying, you know, he graduated from school early. And this whole thing about there was a guy outside carrying on, jumping on cars and everything, and the police officer hears noise coming from inside the house. And he forced his way into the house. I don't understand what that was about. I still haven't gotten the full story of this.
Again, no force being used against the police officer.
No force. He forces his way into a house because he hears commotion going on in the house.
Does that sound like Ramarley Graham up in the Bronx?
Sounds just like Ramarley Graham. Now, Tony didn't live there, but there's no word that he broke in there. There's no word that he was a burglar or anything else. The police were supposedly looking for somebody that was in the street, jumping on cars, carrying it around.
I heard a radio call saying that Tony was outside jumping in front of cars and that he's light-skinned, tall, you named Tony Robinson.
All right, but just the same.
He
So
gave the name.
how does the officer wind up in the house? He heard a commotion, he said, and he forced his way into the place. He wasn't summoned. He heard a commotion. That's the question. How did he get in there? Did he ring the bell? Did he knock on the door? You know,
Hot pursuit is how they cover it up sometimes.
He wasn't in pursuit of anybody
But that's how they cover
because
it up.
he never saw Tony in the street.
They're going to say.
So how would he know that Tony is in the house? And even if Tony was in the house, you're not in pursuit of anybody, right?
That's the lie you can expect before the grand jury.
So the one good factor is that the police department is not investigating the case. The State Bureau of Investigation is handling the case. They don't have the DA, they don't have the police. It's a special unit run by the state of Wisconsin.
So this is being handled a little differently.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they have a special new unit that comes in and they take over the investigation. The chief of police was quick to say that, you know, there were no weapons involved other than the weapon the officer had used, and there will be a full investigation, and it's not
Does
being
this have
conducted.
anything to do with the report from the Justice Department on Ferguson? Did this sort of clean up the mess a little bit?
Well, what happens is that they're very much aware that the spotlight and the microscope is going to be on them.
Okay.
They're very much aware of that. And this may be part of the reason why the investigation was taken out of the hands of local police.
Right away.
They're also, I think, very much aware, and the public is very much aware now, that having local police investigate malfeasance by the local police generally leads nowhere.
Okay.
So part of what, there's been a little bit of political education that's taken place across the country. Not enough that our children not enough that they stop using our children for target practice. You know, we still have, again, whether you're talking about New York, LA, Ferguson, we still have our children being targeted by the police when there's no crime that they've committed. What we have to deal with is our expertise, our concern has to be exercised before it's our own child.
Right.
You know, the people who are watching this show, you who have a teenage child or grandchild, don't wait until that bullet hits your family before you speak up. Because that by then it's too late. We have to understand now that your teenage child is my responsibility. Your teenage child, I have to act to preserve not just my own, but our community's teenage boys particularly. And that's part of what I think some people are coming to realize. Those who don't have teenage sons in their own home are now being mobilized to speak up and to speak out. And that's the beginning of a process, because that's how we end up saving the lives of all our teenage sons and daughters. When I begin to care about your son as much as I do about my own. And that's something that, unfortunately, the ugly violence perpetrated by police is pushing some people into that consciousness that maybe before they'd say, well, that's your problem, it ain't mine. But now we're realizing that what happens to your teenage son is my concern.
Yeah, and his mother was on. I saw her yesterday. A white woman. So he's mixed race.
Right.
He's black, but his uncle was saying Tony was white. He was black. He was naming the various races
I
of
saw
people in the family. He said he wasn't just black. He looks black. But he's a milieu of a number of groups of people.
America's melting pot.
And this is why this case is going to be so poignant in that the mother
A white
is a
mother
white,
grieving.
white woman, just as Mayor de Blasio was seeking to advise his son. This white man was advising his son. The PBA had an issue with him advising a black kid about what to do when being stopped by the police.
Right.
So it's not just a black issue. This problem, this systemic problem that's running through the country is hitting everybody. And there is no hiding place down here. All people need to understand that the craziness will happen in your neighborhood.
That's right. No matter what color you are? No.
Whether it's the police or some psycho showing up in your neighborhood and doing some random insanity. The craziness is everywhere. So,
But the white kids still aren't being shot.
Not yet.
No.
And not in significant numbers. There have been one or two instances where you've had white
Name
teenagers There was one because I remember.
You had Gideon
there
Bush
was
in
a-
Borough Park in Brooklyn
well,
about
he
8
was
years
not a teenager,
ago.
but yeah.
But he was
mentally ill.
He had a
He
knife
had a
in his
hammer,
hand.
a hammer,
A hammer.
Okay.
Okay.
Not a justified shooting.
Where's there another case where it was a white victim?
There was some years ago because I remember.
Some years ago?
Yeah, some years ago. It's
How
not something
many-
that happens often, but this is part the consciousness
In the
of our
last
people in the
5
media.
years.
Maybe once or twice it's happened that there was a white teenager who was shot by
Gideon
the
Bush,
police.
you can mention, which was,
There's a name. There's
It's
another.
more than 5 years ago.
yeah.
Yeah, but throughout the United States, the cases of teenagers being shot by the police has predominantly been teenagers of color. That's
course.
something that we're certainly sensitive to. There are other people who are being sensitized to it now because they're realizing, the police who are doing these wrong deeds that police officer is brutal and stupid and vicious in sometimes all that he does. And if he's going to be brutal and vicious and stupid in Harlem, you know what? That same police officer may also be brutal and stupid and vicious in East New York. So that's some of what they're beginning to realize, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And, you look at, there are 3 members of NYPD right now, 2 black, 1 white, 1 black sergeant, a black detective, and a white detective. Between the 3 of them, there are 92 lawsuits pending against the city of New
I remember
York.
you said that once before.
Now,
That's in New York. Say that
New York
again.
City, right now,
92?
92 cases against the city as a result of the actions of these 3 individuals who have been promoted while these investigations are going on. How do you promote a man to sergeant? How do you run any
How many people know
organization?
about this?
What corporation would keep you on their payroll
If you're costing
when you
that
have
kind of
more
money.
than 20 lawsuits apiece? You'd be gone after the first or second one.
Well, what's the answer?
The answer is,
The PBA?
no, not the PBA.
The decision-making
The
process.
answer is, you've had an administrator, you had a police commissioner for 12 years who was as vile as anything.
Sure.
Bratton has come in now. He has a cesspool to work with to clean up. And one of the problems with NYPD is that for years they have failed to flush their toilets. And the stench is just running over the brim. They have held on to people that they could not justifiably hold on. Michael Warren, Tariq Warren, was assaulted on Vanderbilt and Atlantic Avenues about 5 years ago in broad daylight when he walked up to a sergeant who, along with 2 other police officers, was kicking a handcuffed prisoner in the street on the ground. And he said, "Sarge, what are you doing? This guy's in cuffs." The guy told him to mind his so-and-so business. He said, "This is my business. I'm an officer of the court." He showed him his identification.
He was in civilian clothes.
Yeah, he's an attorney.
Right.
So he said,
Officer of
"Get
court.
in your mother so-and-so car and get out of here." And Michael turned and went to his car and started taking notes.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
So
I
while
remember.
he's writing, sitting in his car, he's punched in the face.
Right.
The sergeant opens the door, drags him out, and starts beating him, tears up his suit. His wife says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" The sergeant punched his wife in the mouth. And they were both arrested.
That's right.
All right? So my wife and I were at dinner. A pastor I knew from the area said, "Hey, Graham, such and such," he just got a phone call about it. We immediately went to the 7-7 precinct. So the sergeant was never reprimanded for the assault. But the victim was arrested for obstructing governmental administration. Needless to say, there was a lawsuit that came out of it in federal court. But the sergeant has since been promoted to lieutenant by Ray Kelly. So
And
this is
how
a
long ago was
systemic.
this?
I'd say about 5 years ago.
Well, the Eleanor
Yeah,
Bumpers
fine.
case also, if you remember, Thomas Shea, he got promoted not
He
long
got
afterwards.
promoted. He got promoted to
Shoots and kills an
detective.
unarmed grandmother in her own apartment, and later on there's a gold shield waiting for him. I mean, it's not rare that police officers will pat each other, literally pat each other on the back, and you see that in certain scenes after a black man has been shot.
Right, right.
Literally, you will see that happening, that they will pat each other on the back.
Right.
And then in terms of commendations and promotion, that follows later on. What we have to deal with is we have to deal with our proactive stance to protect our children. That becomes critical. We have to understand what's necessary to keep our children out of the gun sights of police officers who shouldn't be wearing a badge. As it is right now, we don't have enough powers to get rid of the bad police officers. Even the mayor that we currently have, there are enough bad officers who are still there, whether it be their union, their influence, whether it be their family connections. There are enough bad officers who are still carrying the guns on the streets of our community. So we have to work to save the lives of our children. Part of that involves educating our children. Part of that involves educating our adults. So if somebody says to me, you see that boy down the street, that's Graham's boy. He just did something bad. They ought to lock him up. We need to check ourselves. Wait a minute. Just because you're giving me a rumor of what you think somebody's child did, that means that I should be backing up the police officer? I should understand, again, that Raymond, that the child, if it happens that Brother Weatherspoon, his child is like my child, is like your child. That's what ultimately will preserve our lives. When we take that responsibility for each other, and when we understand that fighting for what happens in Ferguson, fighting for what happens in Staten Island, fighting for what happens in St. Louis, that this becomes a responsibility for all of us. It's not just a Ferguson problem. It's not just a LA, a Louisiana, Frisco problem. We have to take upon ourselves, it's all of our problems that all of us can solve.
Also, the New York City Police Department is probably the most costly agency that the city has in terms of litigation. The New York City Police Department has cost the taxpayers over $1 billion in lawsuits over the last 12 years. $1 billion that could have gone into a plethora of things, whether it's education, housing, healthcare. It could have been utilized in a better way. And when you, the violator, don't have to pay.
Really?
The taxpayers end up having paying those things.
The taxpayer is paying, footing the bill, but the violator is paying nothing. You see, and something has to be done about that. People always sue the city because they know they can collect from the city. I don't know what the process is, but to sue the officer specifically. Because these guys retire with their pensions and their health care.
Yeah, right.
And your scenario is whatever it is with you and your family as a survivor or as a person who's been victimized, psychologically damaged, emotionally damaged. You see, we're not looking at the psychological damage that has been done to young men on the streets of New York for the last 12 years. No one's looking at that. The fact that our kids think it's normal to go through a metal detector going into school, that's abnormal.
Yeah.
That is not normal thinking. The fact that you should have school safety officers in school, it's abnormal, and you really have to check yourself too.
And when they're replaced by police officers, they're not school safety officers
they're not
anymore.
School safety.
It's
so
police
now
officers.
when you get into a fist fight, it becomes assault, and you're charged with a criminal offense. But we also have to check ourselves, because when our kids don't behave, there's no reason for a kid to be carrying a gun to school.
Right.
A knife to school.
Crazy.
So because we're not checking ourselves, we are not taking care of our children properly, and they're going out and doing what they're doing, that's what brings this other problem. It just increases the problem, because now our children get out of check, and then somebody else is coming to put them in check. And when they check you, you don't like being checked.
One of the things that happens, and we have to recognize this, is the police officers who very often used to, when the communities were white, see themselves as working for the community. Very often, those police officers in the black community now, they don't see themselves as working for the community. They see themselves as working for someone outside of the community, whether it be the politicians, the business investors, the real estate owners. The police officers do not see themselves as servants of the people. So in some ways, they are free to abuse the people whom they do not serve. The idea of having police officers be servants of the community, that is something that was very much talked about in the early 70s, but as the largest cities of the United States have become more brown and more black, the idea of police officers serving the community, that has dissipated. So they are now serving interests other than the people in the community. And that's something that we have to recognize has to be dealt with. Whom do they serve? Whom is it that they are there to protect and serve? And most police officers, if you talk to them candidly, will not say that they're in the black community to protect and serve the black community. That's a reality we have to deal with politically. And we have not yet had this strong enough political will to re-educate police officers that they're supposed to be serving us. They're supposed to be protecting us, which they used to think when the community was white. But they've changed their minds nowadays.
All right, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go into my favorite topic, President Obama. And all the abuse he's been taking. I wanted to start off with Giuliani and the 9/11 thing, but that's a little bit much.
That's a waste of time, Giuliani.
Because I just wanted to show this ass, excuse my expression, Giuliani, that he was behind, he was privy to the taking down of Building 7. That's where his headquarters was. I had a clip that I was going to run, but we don't have, that's too much time. But I want to run a clip of Obama in 2007 at the National Action Network Convention, which is coming up this April 8th to 11th at the Sheraton Center. So you that are, aware of what Reverend Sharpton is doing, and luckily he wasn't called to this case, Tony Robinson, but he only waits for people to call him. He doesn't rush to, you see he's not out there because they haven't called him. But he has plenty to do, as you well see. April 8th to the 11th at the Sheraton Center. Call Nan for 690-3070, 212. 690-3070. Call Nan for reservations. Nan Convention, April 8th to the 11th. Now let's take a look at President Obama. This is 207.
It's breaking my flow. Russ says it was my wife. She tells me what groceries I got to bring home tonight. All right, where was I? I was at law school. Southside, $13,000, went to law school, came back. And because I had done well in law school, I had an option to go to some of the Wall Street firms and make a lot of money, but I decided I still believed in that principle of working at the grassroots level. So I spent the first year out of law school organizing a voter registration drive and registering 150,000 new voters to help Democrats get elected in 1992. And then I started the civil rights practice, and I represented people who didn't have a voice, represented folks who had been discriminated against on the job, African Americans and Hispanics and women, represented African Americans whose votes had not been properly counted and who did not have an opportunity to meaningfully participate in the political process. I started teaching constitutional law, seminars on race and the law at the University of Chicago Law School. And after a few years, a Senate seat where I lived opened up. And some people asked me, because they knew of my community activism, whether I'd be interested in running for the state Senate. And I did what every wise man does under such circumstances. I prayed on it, and I asked my wife. Amen. And after consulting those two higher powers, I did what every first-time candidate does, which is I talked to every person who would listen to me. So I'd go around and I'd go to the PTA meetings and I'd go to the block parties, I'd go to the barber shops and beauty shops, and everywhere I went I'd hand out literature and folks would look at it and they'd say, so you're running for Senate. They'd have two questions for me. First question, where did you get this funny name Barack Obama? Although they wouldn't say it right and they'd call me Alabama. So they call me Yo Mama. And I'd have to explain my name's Obama. And my father was from Kenya, from Africa, which is where I got the name from. And then my mother was from Kansas, which is where I got my accent from. But the second question bears on today. Because the second question people would ask is, you seem like a nice young man. You've got a fancy law degree, could be making a lot of money, you teach at a fine law school. You got a beautiful family, church-going man. Why would you want to go into something dirty and nasty like politics? Why would you want to go into politics? And the question is understandable because at some level, all of us feel cynical about the political process. Even those of us who are involved in it feel cynical about it because we get a sense that politics has become a business and not a mission. That power, especially in Washington, is always trumping principle. That we've got a lot of leaders who are long on rhetoric but short on follow-through. And so, over time, we get discouraged. Over time, we start feeling as if what happens in the public arena doesn't really make much of a difference. Maybe every 2 years, every 4 years, we vote, we hold our noses, choose the lesser of two evils. But we don't really have confidence that government is going to make a meaningful difference in our lives. At most, we hope that it does us no harm. But what I said to people in that first race, and the same thing that I've said in this political campaign, this presidential campaign, is that there's always been another tradition of politics. There's been a tradition that says that we're all connected as a people, that we've got a stake in each other. As I said at the 2004 convention, if there's a child in Harlem that can't read, that makes a difference in my life, even if it's not my child. If there is a veteran in Chicago that is foraging through a dumpster because he's homeless, because he didn't get the proper services that he needed after serving this country, that diminishes all of our patriotism. That basic notion that I am my brother's keeper, that I am my sister's keeper, that is part of what has built up America at every stage. We like to talk about our self-reliance and our individualism, and that's a good thing. But what we have to also talk about is the notion that we're one community. That we.
Now, as you realize, I'm the only one with that footage.
Excellent.
That's an exclusive from When Christ production.
A piece
now, that's
of history.
Obama in '07. Now, you hear what he talks about, community organizing, how he could have went and worked for rich people, and he chose to stick it out in the south side of Chicago as a community. That was before he went to law school, though. Mm-hmm. But as it comes out, when he got through law school and Harvard at that, he decided to go into politics because he wanted to change things. I mean, lofty ideas, and here we got 8 years later, he's gray, and they've been beating him up from day one.
Well, he's changed a lot of things that he hasn't gotten credit for. You have billionaires who are sitting on the boards of directors of the banks that were on the brink of bankruptcy,
right.
And the work that he did helped save those banks from insolvency and bankruptcy.
Right.
He saved their behind, some of these billionaires.
Not the Federal Reserve.
He doesn't get, no. I think his push, because he realized that the poor people and the homeowners were being hurt more by the bankruptcies than the billionaires. You know, someone who has $10 billion, they can lose $8 billion, and they're still kind of filthy rich.
Right.
So that's one of the things that he did for which he hasn't gotten credit. There are lots of other things that he's done. He has helped engender small businesses, most of whom, and this is interesting, most of the small businesses that are coming about that are thriving are run by white women. As a demographic, the small businesses that are succeeding, and along with getting into college, more of them getting into college, more of them going into business, and he has helped small businesses to get a bigger chunk of the pie, which he doesn't get enough credit for. Okay. You know, there are things that I don't necessarily think are good, but they have to recognize what he's done for them. The so-called war industries, the military, industries, the military, and it's everything from those who are coming up with high-tech remote control tanks to those who are doing the stitching of the new uniforms. The military spending has increased under Obama. So these are people, and these are industries. Military spending
has increased.
This is part of what's happening.
Even with all the cuts?
Even with all the cuts, because the cuts are not in the budget, the cuts are in the people. not necessarily in the budget. So they're spending
Okay.
some, and this is part of what, so that even though I don't like them, these are people who've made billions of dollars because of Obama. You know, there are high-tech people that have nothing to do with war, certainly, well, hopefully have nothing to do with war. We're thinking now of things like the privately owned spaceships that are traveling into space, that are refueling and replenishing the supplies for the space station. These are people that are making billions of dollars from what has been done by the president. So part of what I want to underline, and I'm not talking about people of color, I want to underline that there are people who are making lots of money and doing a whole lot better under the president
So what
than they
has he
were
done
before.
for black people?
Well, he's fought and he's put his head on the chopping block for us. And I'm going to play devil's advocate because the people who will talk about what he's done for black folk, they will diminish his accomplishments by saying, well, he's just being parochial. What I want to play up is the fact that he's not being parochial or provincial. He is being what is necessary to benefit America. So that the white folks who criticize him, they're making plenty of money because of him. You know,
Well, we talked about his legislation on Obamacare.
again,
I mean, that's what he's doing for
a
black
whole lot of
people.
poor,
You know,
a whole lot of
more
poor
white
whites
people
have
benefit
benefited
from Obamacare than black people.
And
Let's
this is
remember-
very rarely
where-
said.
Let's remember, there are not enough black people in this country to swing the pendulum on anything. Now, white people put Obama in office, not black people.
Well, we
You
helped.
have to look, we helped, but you
There are
have
more
to
of them
look,
than us voting.
you have to look at the people that voted for this man. Yeah, 95 or 96% of all black people voted for him, but that alone could not get him through the electoral college.
Women.
It was the white people that jumped on this bandwagon. When I met him in 07, I met him in 07. In the meeting that I was in, there was a number of black Democratic politicians, and there were a bunch of white people there. And we're in a mansion on the promenade in downtown Brooklyn overlooking the East River. And you got to keep this in mind. As sick as the people are in Washington, there were enough white people to look at this guy with Barack Yo Mama or whatever his name was when they couldn't pronounce his name. They looked at McCain and they looked at Obama and they said, hell no, we're going with the black guy. And we're not going with him because he's black. We're going with this guy because he makes sense, he's intelligent, and we can't keep going down the path we've been down. Because remember, the country was bankrupt. The country was bankrupt. The Federal Reserve, and people don't know it, filed for bankruptcy in the international courts. International courts and the World Bank and the IMF said, you ain't filing for bankruptcy. You're going to pay off what you got to pay off. We ain't letting you go. All right? They let Greece file for bankruptcy and Argentina, but not the United States. Why? Because these are the people that brought down the economy of the entire world.
That's right.
All right? AIG and
Right.
all of this stuff.
AIG.
So Barack Obama, and you got to look at it, any time a black man is handed the helm, the ship is sinking.
Right.
Well,
When David Dinkins got the helm,
It was sinking.
it was sinking. And I said to him the night he got elected, we were sitting in the hotel, I said, Your Honor, you know there's nothing in the drawer to work with. The coffers are bare.
All right.
And it was the
All right.
same thing when Barack Obama was elected. The country was bankrupt. The banking system was on the verge of collapse. The entire country was going down the tubes behind the insanity that had been going on for 8 years with Bush and the war. And keep in mind, when you talk about the military, he hasn't been able to draw down all the troops that he wanted to draw down. Now we have troops that have to stay in Afghanistan. Now we got to deal with ISIL and ISIS.
Yeah.
So the military they're gonna do very well over the next few years as this fighting
nowhere
goes
near
on.
to going broke. And again, if I talk about what Obama has done for black folks, and it's innumerable things that he's done, not the least of which is what happens to our children when they see a face looking like this sitting at the White House.
Okay.
That is that's beyond value. But if I were to talk about what he's done for black folks, then people would accuse me of just being limited in my purview, which is why I want to make it clear.
Humor me. Just give me.
Again, you know, if you're talking about health care, certainly that is one of the fights that he put his political career on the line, fighting to make sure that everybody was entitled
There's no
to health
other
care.
president could get it done since
Roosevelt
They've been
started
trying
it
for what,
in the
50 years?
1930s,
Right.
and
they
it took
he
all this
couldn't get it
time.
done.
Hillary tried to do it.
That's right, 20-something odd years ago.
This is part of what he has done that has helped us. He has done some things in terms of access to college for poor children come out of our community who don't have that $5,000, $8,000, $10,000 a year. That is part of what he's been pushing consistently throughout his education secretary and throughout his dealing with young people. That more of our young people would have the education, that they can be the future leaders, and they then can be the next Barack Obama.
And cutting the interest also on the student loans.
Right, that's
You know, and the Congress voted against it. You see, what you got to keep in mind, and this is something that Bloomberg, the scam Bloomberg had running here with the Department of Ed. He was bringing in people to teach from outside of New York. You see,
and paying their student loans.
their student loans were forgiven because they come to New York, they work in an underprivileged area for 5 years, and they don't have to pay back the student loans. So he was bringing in all these white kids from out of state, providing them with jobs in a period of a down economy, all right? And they're coming in from Omaha, Nebraska, Wyoming, wherever they're coming from, they're coming here to teach. And their whole attitude is, I just got to do 5 years and I'm out.
Right.
And they don't care about the kids.
And that's what happened to education.
They were providing housing for people too.
Yes.
To come here to work.
Recruiting people.
When people that live here, went to school here, got degrees in education, were told by the Department of Ed, we're not hiring you because you have an education
Well, what
background.
about our future here?
Well,
Now,
the children are our future. That's critical.
Okay.
And a place to live is also critical. These are fights that are ongoing, and these are fights that are critical. Because one of the things that's happening, and it's behind the curtains, you still have a lot of maneuvering happening in terms of real estate and access to a decent place to live for people of color. We're being priced out of Harlem. I think you know that very well. Travel up and down Lenox Avenue, you see that. Parts of Fulton Street, you can travel some blocks of Fulton Street and not see a single black-owned business.
well, I think we have to worry about how they're treating Obama, because the way they're treating Obama is only because he's black. I mean, people have to be very aware of that. Black people don't even really realize it. I mean, they segregate themselves from Obama. Obama's not quite black, or he's not black enough.
Everything
He's
that's
too black for the
happening to him.
Republicans. He may not be black enough for people who look like us, but for the
But
Republicans,
I
he's
get
too black
black
for
people
them.
telling me his mama was white and they don't like.
Half of the black people in this
country.
country got white blood in them, so they're talking like fools.
Right.
All right? Here is a
We're
man.
talking about these fools who actually don't vote.
Well, that's part of the problem.
That is part of their problem.
Yeah.
You see,
and
it's
and
part of
makes
their
it our-
problem.
Our problem.
And
Well, that goes right back to where we started with the people, the young men who've been shot by the police.
Yeah.
Because our voting would have had different police commissioner. If more of us were voting, we would have been able to pressure the current mayor that there would be a different police commissioner there.
right.
So our lack of voting has an impact upon young men, young people of color being shot by the police, because the police commissioner does not hold himself accountable to the communities of color. And the majority of New York is black, brown, and Asian.
All right.
That's the majority of New Yorkers. This police commissioner does not hold himself accountable to them. He holds himself accountable to the wealthy whites and the few whites who helped him get his office.
Okay. Well, see, the reason why I saw early Obama is that he was a regular brother that had a job.
Yeah.
And for 8 years, he's tried to do a good job, and he's done
He
a
has done a good job.
fantastic
He's done a
good job.
Look at the stock market at 6,500.
they keep breaking records every time you turn around.
It's
It's a new record.
18,000, and he doesn't get a break no matter how good he
The
is.
same billionaires
They're
that are making
saying
more
if you're
billions
black
off of him.
and anything you do, you have to be twice as good as everybody else. But he's 3 times better than any other president we've had.
Ergo, a shooting victim. What
yeah.
did they do? Scandalize his name. Try and have you believe he was no good, this, that, and the other. Understand. Like a snowball rolling down the side of a snow-covered hill, it's growing. So here's Obama at the White House. They're pissing on him. All that stuff trickles down to where you are. Because if they can get away
We're doing it to
with pissing in the face of the commander-in-chief of the United States.
How do you think we fare?
You better believe they'll do it to
That's
you.
what
And this is
you
where
and
the
me-
people
people
need to
got to
wake
know.
up and understand.
What he's showing us is how racist this country really is.
And as Hillary said the other day, and I give her credit for it, she said there was treason what those congressmen
course
did
it
in
is.
writing
There
that letter.
continues to
You
be.
see how
And
carried
They should be
they would never do
prosecuted
that
for that.
under a white
Boy
president. They would
comes
never
in
do
here,
that.
Cotton, what, 2 months in the damn Senate, he writes a letter to the Iranians?
Now-
Telling, don't listen to this boy.
If you try to stunt like
He
that
ain't got nothing to
under
say.
Richard Nixon, you'd be brought up on charges of conspiring with the enemies of the state.
Thank you.
Or
Because
how about
they
Bush,
are
weapons of
colluding.
mass destruction?
That's the point. You
The
know,
real
Precisely.
sin.
We have
That's got
people-
us in this garbage in the first
We have
place.
people in Washington now who are colluding with leaders of foreign nations to undermine the foreign policy of the United
But
States of
why aren't
America.
more Democrats out there raising Cain?
Well, they're
Other than Hillary
scared.
making a side remark.
They're scared of losing support and they're scared of losing dollars. The Koch brothers, they're pulling out a lot of strings behind the scenes.
Yep.
You know, so a lot of Democrats are being silenced because they're afraid. Even the Koch brothers have made billions of dollars because of what happened with the savings of the banks. But they are very, very much holding some of the Democrats in check because they're saying, if you don't do what it is that we want, you know, we're going to make sure that your opponent is going to outspend you 4 or 5 times what you spend. And you have Democrats who are running scared because of the money of the Koch brothers and people of their ilk, so that they will not speak their conscience because they're being
How about
bought out.
Netanyahu coming to the United States like
There
that?
again is
goes
another
al-
example.
That goes along with the
All right.
congressman who
But
would support
this man
ISIS
is
in the letters.
he's a war criminal.
The guy,
We start to get Rabbi Weiss on the phone, hear what he has to say about that.
Well, a lot of Jews
right.
don't support what Netanyahu has done because
Netanyahu
he's
is-
been bad for the economy, and
Right.
that's a whole other story.
he
But
has a challenger now who is a credible challenger. So he's got some problems in the upcoming election.
Okay.
And when you look at the fact that these congressmen call Netanyahu, it also shows you the disrespect that Netanyahu has for the president of the
That's
United
right.
States.
well, it's the
right.
bottom line. If I disrespect my
And
brother,
just because he's black.
this is
It's
part
that
of what.
simple.
To our audience, we have to be. This is a lesson that cannot be said to Wolf. If I disrespect my brother, if I get up here and I start talking about Brother Witherspoon wore a badge and he's this, and this, you know, somebody who comes upon him in the street is going to say, that Witherspoon ain't nobody I should respect. Because I disrespected you publicly, other people are going to feel free to do that.
That's right.
And that's part of what's happening in terms of the president. If the Congress and if the Koch brothers and if local politicians disrespect the president, Netanyahu feels, hey, the door is open, it's my turn.
Didn't
Well,
the
he's
Supreme
always
Court
felt like that.
Didn't the Supreme Court say that a corporation was a person, was an individual entity, and as a result, corporations can get involved in political movements? So, the Koch brothers, any group, and then not just domestic, foreign. So you have foreigners now that are financing elections
Big money.
in this country
Asian money,
to compromise
Middle Eastern
the
money.
integrity of our own government over and against itself, because these people sitting in Congress and in the House of Representatives and the Senate would be working for a foreign entity. That was the problem. You got to go back to the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Johnson, the vice president who became president,
Andrew Johnson.
was impeached because he was a Mason. And the
I don't
problem with
remember
that, he was a Mason. The problem was he went from 3rd degree to 32nd
33,
degree
yeah.
overnight. And you can't go from 3rd degree to 32nd degree overnight. But the Masonic order, the Freemasonry, elevated him to 32nd degree.
Was Lincoln a Mason?
I don't know. It doesn't make any difference. But the thing is this, and this was the issue that the Congress had with Johnson. You went from 3rd degree to 32nd degree. Who was your allegiance to?
Well,
All right? Because the Grand Master of the Lodge will be telling you what to do.
That's right.
And they said, we can't have that. Boop. Johnson was out.
your
Because he
allegiance
was
to?
elevated to 32nd degree Masonry. That's no different than these congressmen who are taking money from corporations and being steered to vote one way or the other, to write legislation one way or the other, and they don't give a flying fig about the people.
to
This
whom
is
do they
about
give their
money.
allegiance?
What do you think is going to happen to these 47 senators that...
I
What do you
think,
think
quite
happened
frankly, nothing. Because between you and me, the
Too many
Congress
of
people, the Congress people who disagree with them, don't have the balls right now to stand up against them.
Does the
That-
police itself?
That's what I think is.
Yeah.
Now we have to work to make sure again that those who are right-minded, that we support them, which again is where it becomes a responsibility of us to stand with each other, not just for what happens on our block, but what happens in our community and what happens in our city. Because you have men and women of integrity who are on the ballot every single November. However, they are outspent by those who have allegiances elsewhere. And that's part of the challenge that we have to put to our neighbors, to our friends. We have to talk about that. Well, can so-and-so really win? Does he have enough money? Or should we support him because of the morality?
Selma. I mean, I saw Selma, and, you know, in 65 hours, I was in a completely different world. I really didn't understand what was going on because of the first 4 years of the 60s, I was in the service and far away from all this stuff. You know, and I come back, I'm working for a bank, I was in society.
You're a New Yorker.
I was real. I mean, I was having a good time.
He was living up on the hill.
Well, New Yorkers were
I was living on
separate from-
92nd Street,
Separate.
Lakeside Drive. I mean, I was living it up, having partying all day.
We
going
were
to
told
Pace
that that's
College.
our people. Those poor cotton pickers are not our people.
But that same year, down in Selma, Alabama, the people were getting whopped upside their head. And 50 years later, we sit there and watch the president give a fantastic speech. And who's sitting next to him but his wife and President Bush? That was a sight
No, but
to see.
I think they didn't know how to disinvite Bush. I think a lot of people
that
felt he
was
shouldn't
good.
be there.
I thought that was good. I thought that was good that Obama got Bush. Now, I mean, here's a rational Republican. Here, everybody was bad-mouthing Bush. Bush was catching hell from including me and you.
Right,
I mean,
he
we were
deserved it.
kicking. They were talking about his
Daddy Bush
daddy, his
must have been
grandfather,
squirming in his
and
wheelchair.
everybody else. Here come to find out, Cheney was behind all that garbage. Bush was bamboozled by Cheney.
Well, we know that.
Cheney was
so
in
what's
the-
that got to
but
do with
people-
Selma?
I don't know. See, what I'm
Nothing.
saying is that, yes, it does. It shows that Bush has got some kind of sense. He was there. Well, how Obama got him there.
The symbolism was important
He's-
for the Republican
Yeah,
Party.
he's
to have
not the
Bush there.
focus of
But it was
of
important for
of the matter.
Obama, I thought. to have
Yeah, Bush
sitting
is
next to him.
not. You
He's
know,
not
that's
giving-
all the Republicans
he's not
decided that
giving any all this guff that Cheney's given him over the years, and he's got Bush sitting next to him.
Bush
and they're
can't comment
bad-mouthing
on
him.
anything. He can't, because he was
Well,
the
he
commander
made a
in
promise
chief.
that he wouldn't.
He can't comment on
He's
anything.
made a promise that he will not
But
contradict.
Cheney
He was a
made
total
up for
disgrace.
anything he didn't
You know.
say.
But Selma, more importantly, is not about Bush. It's not
But
about
Bush was there. Were you
So what?
surprised?
So what?
I was
That-
surprised
you know.
because between his daddy and
You
Cheney,
weren't surprised?
I was a bit surprised.
It ain't about him.
Because again,
But I mean, weren't you surprised he
I
was
don't
there?
care if he was there. It ain't about him. He's not worth talking about
he didn't
with
fight
regard
the
to
fight.
Selma.
He celebrated his
wasn't
victory,
part
but
of
he
it.
didn't fight the fight.
John
to-
Lewis got
to
a
get our
skull
rights.
fracture. All right, I sat with John Lewis and talked with him. That's somebody to talk about. Bush, non-factor. He showed up. He's only there because he was the president. He didn't do anything for the
Well, he
people
wasn't
down
the
there.
president doing something.
No, he wasn't. But I'm saying he wasn't
he-
doing
he
anything
had the
for black people.
opportunity to do-
He wasn't doing anything for black people. John Lewis got his head fractured. You had people trampled. You also, the bombings that went on. You had people dying when no criminal prosecution was going on throughout the South for so many years. Back in the 30s when the lynchings were going on, Roosevelt refused to address the lynchings that were going on in this country, even when addressed by his own wife, and he lambasted her for bringing that issue up in a public forum. In his wheelchair, he probably threatened to hit her with the wheelchair if she ever did it again. But here was Selma, Alabama, like other places, not unlike even New York in some ways. See, we can't think because we lived in New York,
Yeah,
it
I
was
know.
great.
It was
We
nothing.
went to
That's why I
Howard
was
Beach.
making the
I was
comparison. That's why I
shot at
making
in
a
Brooklyn more than once. I've been shot at more than once, and I wasn't a cop
And
at the
Brooklyn
time.
was completely different
all right?
than Harlem.
It was white people shooting at me. It wasn't
But
about
Brooklyn
being
was
a
completely
police
different
officer.
country.
We walked across.
When we were kids.
You certainly remember when Reverend Al walked across that bridge to Howard Beach, and I will never forget Pastor White, the white Catholic pastor of St. Helens, because Pastor White, Laura Blackburn, Reverend Al Sharpton, there were a few of us that walked, and we were arm in arm walking across that bridge to Howard Beach. And he was in tears because the same people who were in his congregation coming to him for communion on Sunday were the ones who were throwing stones and vicious words at him as we marched across that beach into Howard Beach. You know, and I was right next to him, and the man was in tears because these are the people.
Right?
And this is the story of.
What year was it?
This probably would have been about 98.
98?
Maybe 98 or so, when the Howard Beach incident happened.
Before that.
And
Before
it was
that.
earlier than...
Yeah.
Because Reverend Sharpton, of course, that was kind of the beginning when a lot of people began to find out who he was. And as I said, Laura Blackburn, God bless her, the work she's done on and off the bench. And again, as a good Catholic, because she and I, we shared the pew in the churches often enough, we were there with that pastor. And the same thing that happened in terms of Selma, where you had preachers who were advocating racism, is the same thing that we now, years later, say is bad. We had preachers in New York who were fighting against racism, and they were having their own congregants tossing stones at them. And so I understand what went on in Selma.
University of Oklahoma.
Oh, boy. Well, that's nothing new. What's new is that there's a video and there's a headline.
Right.
But
it's not, that's
the
not
house mother, too.
But the N-word didn't bother me as much as hang them from the tree?
Strange fruit.
That is
why would
it's not news. I've been on enough college campuses, and I have spoken to people with tears in their eyes. My children went to colleges where they had a whole lot of white people, and they've spoken on college campuses where black students have come to me with tears in their eyes about some of the blank that goes on when there's no cameras around. Right. So that is not news to me, that kind of nonsense. And in 2015, it still goes on. We want to pretend that some of the best universities in America are they're harbingers of freedom, they're harbingers of equality. Some of those universities they are kept going by the money and by the people who are the racists.
Right.
And they will wink and nod, and they will not give any discipline in most cases to the children who are doing those kinds of ugly things. It's happening on a lot of universities. It's not being talked about. Let's pretend it's not happening.
From the White House to the outhouse, there's no respect.
Amen.
Quick note, tomorrow I'll be at Hofstra University. Tomorrow evening I was invited by the Black Student Association of the law school out at Hofstra University. Myself, Nicole Paltry-Bell.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Some defense attorneys, one of the legal analysts for CNN will be hosting it. So we will be out at Hofstra.
Get us a video.
I'll see. It'll be out at Hofstra University
from
6 until 8 tomorrow. We'll be there discussing the issues of the policing and community relations.
Some conscious
And the
brothers and sisters on
investigations
campus.
of it's actually for the black students, the black law students. As they get their degrees, they need to know what the system is really about.
Right. And you'll be at NAN Saturday.
National Action Network. Yes, we had a wonderful workshop before. But there's more things coming up. Every Saturday from 9 to 11, 145th Street, Malcolm X Boulevard. If you're anywhere within driving distance of New York, we invite you to come participate with us. There is a camaraderie that is invaluable. You learn from people. There's some wonderful people doing some wonderful work up there.
And it's church. My Saturday church. I'm always there streaming Reverend Sharpton live.
And it's online. For people who can't make it,
you can go to www.nationalactionnetwork.net, and you'll see my live stream. I do a four-camera switching. It's like here in the studio. Here.
If you're more than 2 hours away, go online. You can catch the work that's going on.
Thank you for coming. The God in me loves the God in you, and stay tuned for more of the Gilchrist Experience. God bless.